Evening and welcome to the Los Alamitos Unified School District Board of Education meeting. And we will call the meeting to order, I do believe, right at 4:30. And we will do a roll call. Mrs. D'Angelo.
Mr. Fayette.
Here.
Ms. Catulli. Here. Mrs. Hill.
Here.
Mr. Forehand.
Here.
Mrs. Davidson.
Here.
I would ask for a motion to adopt the agenda.
Second.
I don't need a roll call, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Fabulous. And now, Dr. Pulver, I will pass it on over to you.
Thank you, Madam President, esteemed members of the board. As you recall at our last board meeting during President Hill's, I believe it was the president's report, shared that we'd be doing an update on our district safety. And we wanted to present to the community and to all of you some of the things that we have done in the past and continue to do when we take a look at safety. Dr. Jerry Freeman is our Director of Safety and Student Services, who will be presenting to each of you tonight. He also facilitates a safety committee that we have and a wellness committee, that kind of our joint committee that works together with stakeholders from all of our schools. And I believe a few of you serve on that committee as well. And as I think we all know, that safety is something that is always at the forefront of our minds, particularly whenever violence occurs at a school site. And so obviously last year with Uvalde, one of the first meetings that we had this year with superintendents, we had a presenter speak to us as well regarding safety, who's a safety consultant. And if you know or recall, the board several years ago, it first implemented a safety consultant before we actually had a full-time director of safety to really take a look at various mitigation efforts. What I was reminded of at that meeting was where they really talk about how safety needs to be a layered approach. There's not one thing that's going to resolve issues. And so you'll see tonight when Dr. Freeman speaks, is really going to show the different layers of things that we have done. And I'll remember when I was at that meeting, even one of the superintendents had asked the safety consultant, because many districts don't have fencing around their campuses like we did. And this is something the board asked us to do 7+ years ago, I believe. And many of them still don't have that first layer. And they asked, is that really an important layer? Because some people don't like fences around their schools. And he absolutely said yes. He said, I think in this day and age, you've got to think of it again as multiple layers of safety to prevent within that. And so it just always pleased me a little bit that we've made those efforts way before. And I know some districts are still trying to even grapple with that decision. And I think, so I look forward tonight to Dr. Freeman being able to share an update to all of you and to the community regarding where we are and some of the initiatives that we're continuing to focus forward this year with safety.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pulver.
Good afternoon, Madam President, esteemed members of the board, executive cabinet. It is my pleasure to present a district safety update for you this evening. What happened about 5 years ago, 2017, 2018, the Orange County Grand Jury sent out a survey to all the local school districts trying to identify what safety measures were in place, and after identifying those, wanted to make some recommendations as to what might make schools even safer. And they came out with a report which listed a lot of recommendations that school districts should implement. So I'm going to go over those recommendations and how Los Alamitos Unified School District has responded. So one of their first recommendations was to control school access. And you'll see a quote directly from the report under each of those main titles. They said to access control to school campuses and buildings, and that's a top concern for Orange County school officials. So they recommend establishing one main entrance with identifying signage, which we certainly do at all of our school sites. We even went a step further by putting in camera buzz-in gates at each school site as well. And they also recommend creating and using strict visitor sign-in, sign-out, and escort procedures, which you can see our Raptor emblem down there. The Raptor system, for any visitor that wants to go onto a campus past the school office, they have to provide a photo identification. It gets scanned, and that gets run against the Megan's Law database against any sex offenders, so that we can make sure that anybody who accesses our campus is a safe person to be on our campuses. Another recommendation that Dr. Pulver just alluded to is fencing, and they said the fencing at a school's property line provides the school's first line of defense against violence or intrusion. And back in 2018, I saw all of the plans. There were a lot of needs that were identified, and since that time, all sites are now closed campuses. All sites now have perimeter fencing, and you'll see in red some items in this presentation. Those are items that we are still kind of either in progress or still considering or still working on. And I think that, as Dr. Pulver mentioned, safety is an ongoing matter as well. So we have ongoing fencing and gate updates as needed and as identified. Just recently, we realized that there were a couple areas at Hopkinson that could be a little safer, and therefore we updated that perimeter fencing at Hopkinson, and there's a few photos of that.
And I think what's important, because there's so many different layers to safety, that whenever issues occur, it gives us a stronger lens to go back and relook. And so that's always really important. And as Uvalde occurred, Jerry and actually CJ as well received different requests from school sites and said, hey, you know what, this fence, there's not a way to push out if we needed to do a mass exodus. So to adding push bars into some of the locations. We were, I think a few of us were at a back to school night at McGaw, and a parent had showed to us where the fence, technically if you're on the outside along the main highway along Seal Beach, that you could reach your hands through and push open the gate from the outside. So it kind of did, why have that gate there? And so good lenses to have. And so what we have done in those situations and what we'll be doing at McGaw, and we talked with Mrs. Wood, is we just put the screens there so that you can't reach your hand through. But all of those types of things are really important for us to get the information from school sites, so how we can continue to make these updates. And so as Jerry alluded, when you see red, those are things that we're focusing in on and following up more this year as feedback has been received.
I have a quick question since Dr. Pulver stopped us.
Oh, we'll probably do it along the way.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's good.
good.
Absolutely.
Jerry and I designed it this way.
So this is a really, this is something that's very personal to me. When I was a child in kindergarten, there was a restraining order against my father, and he was able to come on campus and almost got me off of campus before somebody realized that. And so with this Raptor technology, does that, you said that it connects to Megan's Law. Does it also connect to restraining orders or to other legal notices of who children can be released to?
Absolutely. It is a great system. A lot of our school offices have a lot of custody paperwork. We have restraining orders at just about every school site in some way, shape, or form. And all we do is we put in the Raptor system that person, if that person shows up and scans their ID, or they even put, the office coordinator can input the name, and an alert will come up. And not only will the school principal be alerted that unauthorized visitor, please report to the office, I get an alert, and several of us at the district office get an alert. So there have been many times where we will call the school and say, hey, is everything okay? Fortunately, those have all been mistakes. Somebody puts in hits the wrong button, because there's also an emergency button. So if a visitor is being unruly and maybe getting a little aggressive while that school office coordinator is inputting their name, they can just simply click on the alert button. And if the principal is in a classroom doing an observation, they get that on their phone and says, come to the office immediately. They could step out of the classroom and radio to say, hey, what's going on? Or they could immediately go there. We would get those alerts as well. So those do have to be input manually, of course, but our school office coordinators are very well versed in that, and our spectacular IT team has helped many offices put those type of alerts in.
Thank you very much, Dr. Friedman.
Sure. Another one of the recommendations that came out of the Orange County Grand Jury report was staff and student identification badges, and they mentioned that the use of visible staff badges on campus affirms that the individual belongs there and also keeps outsiders that they would be out of place. So in our district, all staff members receive photo identification badges. All secondary students receive photo identification badges, and even when our visitors scan their driver's license, that badge has their photo on it as well. So as Dr. Pulver and I have discussed, and we discuss at a lot of our meetings, I think our sites are varied as far as the actual implementation of really requiring those badges to be worn and be visible, and that's an area that we will be working on, especially now that a lot of our gates and some of our keys can be opened by the badge. It will give staff even another reason to say, hey, I got to make sure I have my badge everywhere I go on this campus, because then I don't have to carry my keys, because some of our buildings now are only can be accessed by those badges.
Because as we've talked, it's one thing to have the fencing, it's one thing to have the badging, but really what we have to also consider working on ongoingly is the effective implementation of that. As you know, sometimes if the gate is propped open slightly for convenience purposes, you're just wasting your time. And so we've got to work on making sure we're effectively and consistently enforcing the procedures and the practices that we know we are charged to put in place.
Another recommendation that came out of the Orange County Grand Jury report was emergency communications, and that the district should have an infrastructure in place to create consistent, effective, and coordinated communication across the school and with the district office. So we do have an IP telephone system that allows for all call announcements to be made from any phone, from any classroom. We can communicate with our parents in our community through our Parent Square app, and that can be done via phone, email, and text. Each school site can communicate with each other internally with their walkie-talkies, and then each school site also has the ability to communicate with our buses for transportation as well as to the district office. When we do our great California Shakeout, which is next week, that's always a time where we try to fine-tune some of those. A lot of times we identify maybe a radio that hasn't been charged correctly, maybe a radio that needs a new battery. That's a really good time to look at all of those materials and make sure everything is in working order. Yes.
Dr. Freeman, this is amazing. All of the connections. How are we connected with the local police department? Is
right
that
now,
straight 911 or?
It would be 911. Because of our great relationships with our local law enforcement, we discuss these items in our working group meetings with Los Al PD, Seal Beach PD, and even our Orange County Sheriff. At this point, it would be 911. I'm not aware. I was looking through some of my predecessors' notes, and I'm not sure if there ever was a means of communicating with our radios to local law enforcement. I know that's been a challenge in some other situations, but 911 right now would be our best contact. Diana.
And don't we, if I understand correctly, we utilize a system, all of our police, Seal Beach Police use Westcom. And so that really allows us to have a centralized communication to anywhere that we need to be, correct?
That is correct, and they talked about that when we've had some recent meetings about how mutual aid would be so easily to coordinate amongst all the local law enforcement agencies.
When Mr. Fayette and I and members of Executive Cabinet met with the Seal Beach City, Chief Gonchek basically brought that up, and he said it all goes to Westcom, and if it was like a Los Al school or a Rossmore school, Los Al PD would probably be first, and Seal Beach would be second, and Orange County Sheriff would be third. But everybody is aware of it, and they also said if something happens at McGaw, they're obviously first, and then Los Al is second. So I felt like at least there had been conversation among heads of departments about this, so I felt good.
And You'll see that a little further in the presentation. That's one of our recommendations, is to have good relationships with your local law enforcement and drills, and I'll get to those shortly.
Well, and there's redundancy, and I think that's really important. That's where you get
Yep.
safety, because you can't always just depend on one.
Absolutely.
The radio challenges, there's the frequencies, et cetera, that just get challenging even just within our own district, let alone to be able to work with Seal Beach, LaSalle, and sheriffs. But, case incident just on Friday when McGaw had to call Seal Beach Police. They responded to the school. There was a movie night for parents within, I believe it said, the press release said within a minute of the phone call. So that was rapid response by Seal Beach Police Department, which we have every confidence in.
Another recommendation that came out of the Orange County Grand Jury report was regarding windows, and they state that if security window film is properly installed, that can delay a perpetrator long enough to foil their plans or give those inside precious time to find a way to remain safe. So Mylar window film is installed at all of our sites. Mylar is an anti-shatter, or it's a security film. It reduces the projectile hazard of flying glass, and it really prevents somebody from being able to break a window, reach in, maybe open a door and gain entry. And so we have that at all of our school sites, which is great. Another recommendation is regarding locks, keys, and smart cards, and they state that it's imperative that classroom doors can be locked from inside. All of our schools have plenty of lock blocks so that they can easily secure their classroom. They can keep their door locked, however, and closed, but they can have that lock block in there, and without exiting the classroom, they can flip the lock block and their door is secured. We also have stepped it up, especially with the new high school building, that now we do have ID badges that will open certain exterior gates and doors. And in red there, another concern that came out of a recent meeting and from Uvalde was how do we handle classrooms that are connecting and they have that interior door? How can we secure those classrooms? So we're looking into that. We have some tentative plans in place so that each teacher would be able to secure their classroom, even if there was an interior door between the two classrooms.
And that was really feedback that we got from some of our sites after Uvalde, because as you know, Uvalde, the shooter was able to kind of get through other rooms through that connecting door. And it's a question that Jerry has posed to Seal Beach Police, to LaSalle Police for their recommendation, because there's also some pros of being able to, does that also help kids exit out faster to get away as well? And so now are you limiting that? When I was at that superintendent's meeting and we had the safety consultant, that was a direct question I had asked, because we hadn't gotten a firm response of what is that recommendation. And the safety consultant at that time, when I asked should the classroom doors be locked in between, his advice was yes. He went so far as saying, and I don't know if it's exactly 100% true, but he said there hasn't been a school shooting where a door has been locked. So, I mean, I'm taking that on face value of what he shared. So that is something that we will be working on. And that's at a lot of our elementary schools and some of our classrooms where they have the doors that are adjoining between. And so we'll want to give the access for both sides of the classroom teacher to be able to lock that ability. So something we're addressing.
Another recommendation that came out of the Orange County Grand Jury report was regarding surveillance cameras. They mentioned that those cameras can reinforce security options for schools. We currently do have cameras, very robust systems at both the high school, McGaw, and Hopkinson has a smattering of cameras right now around the exterior. We've already gone and walked with all of our principals to identify the locations for the installation of cameras, and we are already in the process of working with suppliers and contractors to begin installation of surveillance cameras at all of our remaining sites. So we look forward to having that implemented as soon as possible. And they did make some additional recommendations in the report that I'm just addressing as bulleted items here. The first one is not even really a glowing recommendation. They talk about metal detectors, and even in their report, they say that many groups say the use of metal detectors can actually have a negative effect on the school environment and may not be a priority. They also mention they recommend the use of an audit tool, and an audit tool would be either an app or a checklist that would provide a snapshot of a school's safety areas that need improvement as well. Could be a resource for developing part of your school safety plan. So we have already reached out to OKAYAK, which is the Orange County Intelligence Assessment Center, and they come out and they will assess school sites, both exterior, and they also look at our, I've worked with John with IT vulnerabilities. So that's in red because that's still ongoing in progress. And then they also recommend Wi-Fi devices or mobile apps. They mentioned that there are a lot of cell phone apps that allow for specific responses. So those are things we'll still continue to look at and consider. We just haven't found that to be the most important implementation as of this point. Diana.
But the audit, I would imagine that that is something that will stay confidential with you because
with those people that need to be involved in any recommendations of things that need to be adjustments or improvements, enhancements that need to be taken. Yeah.
Thank you.
So after the Orange County Grand Jury report, a few months ago, our Chief Claiborne of the Los Alamitos Police Department shared with us the National School Safety Report that went to the Attorney General. And in this national report, they had 10 essential actions that schools could have to improve school safety. And this was a report that was put together by quite a few contributors. You can't see all of that up there, but there were national sheriff's organizations, national police officer associations, just a lot of well-read, well-informed law enforcement officials. So we're going to review the 10 actions that they recommend schools have. They separated them into physical safety and emotional security, and I'm going to go over each one and let you know how Los Alamitos Unified addresses them. Their first essential action is to have a comprehensive school safety assessment. And this is part of their physical safety. And they mentioned that the foundation for all school safety and security is to have a comprehensive risk assessment. So every single school, every year, has to update their comprehensive safe school plan. That has to be approved by the school site council. And we have ongoing, as we mentioned earlier, ongoing assessments and needs get identified, and therefore if things come up, we will add those into the safety plan. And then also in progress, which I already mentioned, is really getting that assessment from an outside agency to come in and look and see what our vulnerabilities were. We've also shared our school site safety plans with local law enforcement so that they have them and they can also review them and be involved as we look to maybe make changes to them in the future.
And you'll recall the reason why I think you see we keep hitting all the marks from the Orange County Grand Jury's report, as well as you'll see from these 10, is this board or previous boards really put this as a priority. And we did this audit. Remember, we had the safety consultant who this was his work for almost 2 years of really taking a multi-layered approach and a multi-hazard approach. And so that's why I think we have been so successful is we really have implemented these audits already, but you have to do it ongoingly.
The next essential action is in regards to emotional security, and they state that fostering a culture of connectedness is an important aspect of school safety, and that's actually one of our board's priority goals and has been and probably will continue to be, to cultivate a thriving and safe culture that ensures a caring, inclusive, equitable, and student-centered environment. And I put quite a few items there, and I could have put quite a few more. We do such a great job at helping kids feel connected, just as far as from being in the parking lots in the morning and welcoming kids, standing at the door and greeting kids. We have a plethora of school clubs at the secondary level. We have many leadership opportunities through ASB, student leadership ambassadors, and really just the 4As in general really help students with their connectedness. Number 3 is in regards to physical safety, and they kind of talk here about, there's no one size fits all. They say that they acknowledge that protective measures will vary based on the characteristics of the site, but they did recommend, they said each school site should at least include the following. Well, we have check marks by all of them, building and classroom numbering systems, which we have. I believe we recently have revisited getting the numbers painted on the roofs of some of our school sites to make sure that if there is a need for law enforcement to have an aerial view to be able to identify classrooms. They mentioned that classroom doors must be able to be locked from the inside. They say we should be able to prevent an assailant from seeing into classrooms, which addresses our window coverings and the ability to pull blinds down. They mentioned controlling access to campus, which we've mentioned. We have single point of entry. And then they do recommend surveillance cameras, and that's in red because we are still working with suppliers to begin the installation of cameras at all sites. The next essential action is in regards to emotional security, and they mentioned that anonymous reporting systems have been shown to be effective in identifying and communicating potential targeted violence. So if you recall, we've talked a lot about Say Something. It's really designed for the secondary schools, and students can submit tips absolutely anonymously via text, online, through an app, or via an actual phone call. And our previous system only had one way to do that, and that was through a text message. So this is a much more robust system. We've already handled multiple tips this year. All of our students at the secondary level were trained as to what would be an appropriate tip to submit, how to submit a tip, and they were assured that unless they provide their name or their phone number and they give that information, it's completely anonymous. And it goes through a call center through the Sandy Hook Promise, not through us. And that crisis call center then routes the tips to the necessary parties that will handle it without divulging any information, because they don't really have any of that information. So it really is anonymous. And like I said, it's already proven to be very successful this year.
Where did we, in what class were the students trained?
That was up to each school site. Some of them went, I want to say one school went to a modified assembly schedule. They worked that out specifically, and I don't recall how they did that.
That's okay.
Yeah.
But thank you. But that was left at the school site to.
Yep.
But it's about a 20 or 30-minute video or training session. I think
It is, and we get, again, it's a very robust system. We were able to monitor how many students actually participated in the training, and they will not allow us to move forward with the program and begin implementation until we have at least 80% of our students trained. So, and we hit that. The company has been very pleased. They said we've been a model district to work with because we've just really been meeting all their timelines so that we get things implemented and be effective as soon as possible. The next essential action, and we had kind of mentioned this earlier, is in regards to physical safety, coordination with first responders. And advanced planning and joint training are essential to ensure that our response is rapid and effective. Just as referenced last weekend, less than a 1-minute response to McGaw in an emergency, pretty quick. And how do we make that happen? Well, through regular meetings with Seal Beach and Los Alamitos Police Departments. We have our district safety and wellness meetings, and those include our first responders. Seal Beach PD is very unique because they only have one school in Seal Beach, and they regularly conduct active shooter incident drills at McGaw. And we're working with Rossmore, and we have a date for a tabletop discussion exercise, and we will be meeting at a school in Rossmore with all of the principals from each Rossmore school to talk over the tactics and the logistics of how we would handle and respond to an active shooter incident at a school within the Rossmore boundaries. So that is scheduled. We also have scheduled an active shooter incident drill that is going to be run by Los Alamitos Police Department. I believe they may be inviting some of our other local law enforcement agencies to participate, but that is scheduled as well. And so that's how we make sure that we have strong coordination with our first responders. The next essential action is behavior threat assessment and management teams. And the threat assessment programs are beneficial in preventing any sort of mass casualty attacks, among other things. We do have staff trained at each school that can conduct safety, threat, and risk assessments. And sometimes they want some additional support. And we have great partnerships with the Orange County Department of Education. They provide multiple resources to our district through the Crisis Response Network, the Crisis Assessment Team, also known as the KETS team, and they also new this year, they have a regional mental health coordinator who is in great contact with our mental health team with Grace and Kaylee. Additionally, as you are well aware, we have increased our school psychologists and our mental health counselors at all of our school sites. School-based law enforcement, the ability of specially selected and trained SROs to establish trust relationships with our students has been demonstrated to prevent school shootings. As I mentioned earlier, Seal Beach PD is very active at McGaw. I put down Officer Kendra Owen. She's kind of the main person over there at McGaw, but there are so many officers, and the kids and staff know them by names. It's great support. Our Deputy Maggie Gardner is the SRO from the Orange County Sheriff. She's actually assigned to all of our schools in Rossmore. She has made visits to every single elementary school in Rossmore a couple of times this year. And we do have our school resource officer from Los Alamitos Police Department, Jody Brucky, and he should be starting at the high school in the near future. That's why that one's in red. Number 8 talks about mental health resources, and this continuum needs to include an adequate number of school-employed mental health professionals who are trained to provide services in the learning environment, and we do have mental health counselors for all sites, school psychologists for all sites. Very unique, I think, to have counselors for our military families at both McGaw and both middle schools. You're well aware we have well spaces, even at the elementary level. Those are maybe that one should have been in red. I'm not sure every elementary has a well space completely in place yet. But we have monthly wellness and mental health themes. Care Solace, we just had a meeting with them recently to talk about our usage and how we can make sure our community, our staff is aware of the resources they provide. And we do have multiple parent education opportunities regarding mental health. Number 9 is back to physical safety. They talk about the importance of establishing and practicing lockdown and evacuation procedures and identifying where students should go during different types of emergencies. We have monthly drills at every school site. I mentioned next week we'll participate in the Great California Shakeout. A few years back, every single staff member was trained in violent intruder response and how to handle one of those situations. Since that time, we've had yearly refresher courses that are offered, and whenever we get new staff, they are trained. So we have multiple opportunities for our staff to participate in violent intruder response trainings. Additionally, this year we wanted to raise the bar a little bit and offer it at each school site so that you can look at the trainer can see the unique facility, that there may be some special nuances if the classrooms may be just a slightly different. So depending on the number of participants, we hope to have a drill at every single school site. If we don't have enough at some of the elementary schools, we may need to combine and move over to one location. And then I mentioned earlier, our Los Alamitos Police Department will be conducting an active shooter incident drill in the near future. Diana.
I'll let Chris go first.
Jerry, first of all, this is outstanding. But on the training of the staff, I know I just met the new security staff member at Lee. And how will he get trained in all of this?
He has that opportunity. The principal, Lee's unique situation right now, I am working with Principal Trotter. That's the only site that doesn't have their date confirmed. We have dates that are tentative, but every single staff member will be offered the opportunity to participate in the training at each school. So that staff member will be given that opportunity to attend the training. If for some reason that day or time doesn't work, typically we offer an additional training later in the year after school. So we want to provide multiple opportunities for our staff to be able to participate.
And you'll recall we also offered it this summer because sometimes people want to be able to have it but not have to do it during the school year. So one of the first times we offered in the summer, and we had pretty great
Yep.
participation.
Yeah, I think we had very good.
summer, too.
The other thing I just want to compliment you on is the ongoing training, because I think so often we do one time and think it's one and done, and something like this cannot be. And I think it keeps it, it's like that muscle memory, you know? And so I just really appreciate that we have that we have that foresight to not just say, oh, we've done it and we're done, and that we keep on doing it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a quick question. And so we provide all these resources, which are phenomenal. I mean, we should be so proud. You should be so proud. Coming out of COVID and dealing with COVID, then you come into this, and it's always some gigantic plan. But I'm curious about our students, our children in the community in the summer. Like if they're experiencing anxiety and depression, and you don't have that teacher, that person to spot it, do we direct our parents to resources, or does our community have any for a child who might be in trouble?
I realized my microphone was off. One of the things we've realized, I think we've done it the last 2 years, but particularly this past summer, for those students that were enrolled in summer school, we ensured that we had our mental health counselors. So we added a mental health counselor that we hadn't done in the past at summer school for serving our secondary schools. Our military counselor, we're working as well. And then beyond that, I don't know, Mrs. Reed, if you have any other things to add regarding most of those things would be through the community. We do have on our website a list of resources that if someone really needed to be able to, Care Solace, and it's probably something, you know, Care Solace does send us some messages, sample messages that we could consider sending out to families at natural times or at holidays, because holidays can also be difficult for those who are dealing with emotional stress, as well as, you know, at the end of the year, maybe that's something we could consider, because I didn't think of it in that lens of doing like an end of the year message so that families have that resource as well.
And our final essential action that came out of the National Safety Report that went to the Attorney General is in regards to social media monitoring. And they state that defensive social media monitoring systems provide constant online scanning of messages to identify threats and at-risk behavior. So we have two of them. We have SysCloud and Securely. And whenever a student is accessing inappropriate or referencing bullying or referencing drugs or alcohol or self-harm, any of those things, alerts go straight to the administrator as well as to me so that we can look into those alerts to find out what's going on. Another way that we can monitor our social media is through our Say Something anonymous reporting system, because a lot of times those Snapchats and those Instagram posts that aren't going through our website, they're out there in the community in students' homes. But a student now can take a screenshot of something, upload it to Say Something, have no worry about, you know, getting their friends being mad at them because it's anonymous. So we have multiple ways to monitor our social media. And then we do have cyber safety parent education opportunities. I think helping our parents understand the magnitude of the technology and the things that can happen with our technology. We've had our cyber safety cop out here last year. We have another cyber safety workshop coming up in the near future. So we offer those parent education opportunities, which are really important.
And then this is something that the county and Okayak and our local law enforcement monitor on a larger scale as well. In fact, I think that's been one of the great findings over the last few years, is that they have some pretty robust systems to take a look. In fact, if you recall, when we had the threats regarding the board meeting, it was Okayak really who were taking a look at different threats on social media that then alerted the chief of police of LaSalle, that then alerted us about that we should consider not holding our board meeting in person. So there are robust systems in the county as well, and law enforcement through Homeland Security, et cetera, to monitor it on a global level. And we've seen various hacks this year. There have been various reports that our police chief has shared with us. We haven't seen it here, but in the nation, there's been some hoaxes that people are trying to do with trying to get schools to evacuate, saying there's going to be a shooter, and there are a lot of hoaxes, and so they're monitoring that. So it's not just us, but also a lot of other agencies have this on a global level as well.
So in closing, I just want to say that safety is absolutely everybody's responsibility. I think it's so important that, as Dr. Pulver mentioned, that there are multiple layers all the time and that it's everybody's responsibility. We get so much input from students, staff, and the community when they identify things that the example Dr. Pulver gave, hey, you can put your hand right through and open the gate. Well, once we knew about it, we were able to address it. The old see something, say something. I think it's great that we all work together because it is everybody's responsibility. And I have to thank the board. You've obviously put a lot of time and effort and resources into safety as well, keeping it a priority. And I think that's really important and shows the value of our board and our district. So thank you.
Right.
Meg.
Jerry, how do you envision the cameras being monitored?
So that's a question that gets asked frequently. Sometimes we do get safety surveys, and they want to know if it's 24/7 monitoring. One of the options, which the majority of schools do, is called post-incident monitoring. So once we hear that something happened on the playground or something happened in the parking lot, we can go back and look at it. Seal Beach is unique with McGaw. They are able to have all of the cameras up and being somewhat monitored in the police station itself. But we've also already talked about some possible options. I've seen at some schools that you can have your office coordinators and your office staff as part of their computer screen, have one window of maybe the front entrance, that camera, so they may be able to see somebody who may be approaching. But for the most part, they are post-incident at this point.
And then one more.
I'm just going to add, it's Jerry. That was a question that I had asked the safety consultant as well when we had the super. He said, again, most districts don't have the personnel to have one person just be responsible for. Right. So what he recommends to districts and to school sites is at the very least adding another monitor in certain areas where there's and not that you put that burden on that office coordinator or that staff person, but that at least it's there, that there might be an eye that it casually sees it, and it just as another layer to support that, as well as Seal Beach said they'd be happy to have, and they have a fee to McGaw, and they said they'd be happy to have a fee to our other schools as well. I'm sure LoSAP would be happy to do that.
That's great.
And the other important thing about surveillance cameras is once they are in, they are a deterrent. Just being there, once people start realizing that they are there, that's a deterrent in itself. So it's really, that's why it's being recommended from multiple sources.
Now, will this be on the website? This is so excellent.
We can make that happen.
Because I can see being able to refer a parent, well, go to the website, and then if you have any other questions, contact me, because this.
When Ms. Pichardo does the board highlights every week, so this will be going out in our board highlights, she actually directly links the PowerPoint to the workshop or an important thing. Yeah. So she will link this directly in the board highlight. And then we also have Operation Steering coming up soon. And Dr. Freeman will be presenting to Operation Steering a similar, maybe not as long as this, but a similar safety presentation, because that's where we have more parents as well and staff.
Just excellent.
And she also links the YouTube. Yes.
Okay. Dr. Freeman, this is excellent, and thank you so much for doing this and keeping our students safe.
You're very welcome.
And since I am the longest sitting board member, I can tell you when Columbine occurred, which was many years ago, I remember being rather intimidated by the fact that they were doing the basically a sociological study of the Columbine High School, very, very similar to LaSalle. And I think one of the reasons why they did that is that they didn't want people to think, well, that could never happen to us, because that was definitely a school where I'm sure every parent said, oh, that could never happen here. We take care of our students, we support our students. And that's when we started talking about what can we do to help protect them. And then when Sandy Hook came about, we had already had the safety committee up and running, but boy, that's when it turned into full steam ahead. And I remember getting calls, and I'm sure Diana remembers it also, people saying, why are you turning our schools into prison? And I just said, not on my watch. If I can put a fence up and prevent any horrific occurrence, I'm putting a fence up. And we did the wrought iron because it's a little less prisony looking than, the wire ones. And so I think we did it well. And I think people now really know that we live in different times and we have to protect our children. And parents do not want to send their kids to school if they're not confident that they're going to be safe. So thank you for your work.
You're very welcome.
Anybody else? Any comments? Dr. Polk?
Oh, I'm sorry. I just want to say one to what the two of you were on the board when the fences went up, and I was teaching at McAuliffe, and I can tell you that when we first saw them, we felt that way, like they're putting us in a prison. But what I really commend you on is the landscaping that you also did, because it absolutely changed the whole atmosphere. And so it was very thoughtful. Some people were saying, why are we putting in all those plants? And I go past the schools now and they look beautiful. So thank you for that, because that's part of mental health too. So thank you, Jerry. That was incredible.
Thank you.
And even that was the lens when we were designing the STEM building at the high school, because that would be a huge perimeter of fencing. And so part of that forethought was to have that building be the physical barrier instead of the fence, because you can't get in via that way.
We had parents not very happy that we weren't putting up a fence right away when we had made that decision. But I think in retrospect, it was really sound.
And then what I'm so reminded of in Jerry's and Dr. Freeman's presentation today is you can see how the tentacles involve so many different departments, from facilities to technology to mental health, ed services, et cetera. It really is this to business services, purchasing, et cetera, that it's such a team effort and so interwoven. And I'm just so blessed that we have such an amazing team who really all sees this as a mission and a forefront of the work that we have to do and ongoingly do.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pulver. Thank you once again, Dr. Friedman, for all your work and all the collaboration with all the other departments. It's phenomenal. So we will now go into closed session at 5:06. Did you need something? Oh, no public comment. That's for later. So we will now go into closed session at 5:16. We will return at 6 o'clock. Correct. Thank you.